First day of September, I'm rejoined by Philip Balboni, founder and senior editor of Daily Chatter, the email that brings the world to you every single morning. Good morning, Philip. How are you?
Good morning, Hugh. I'm very well, thanks. Great to see you. Happy Labor Day.
And to you. Phil, I want to begin with Ukraine, and I want to play for you Major General Mick Ryan, retired Australian military, talking about Ukraine so that we can jump off from there. You cover it quite a lot in Daily Chatter. Here's General Ryan yesterday.
You don't have to spend much time with Ukrainians to understand whether the US supports them or not. They're going to continue fighting Russia. And I think, the heart of the problem here is no one in the West understands what it's like to be under an existential threat. No one understands what it's like to have your cities bombed, your people raped, tortured, murdered, your cities destroyed. And, that gives you a different mindset compared to what, we live in relative luxury in the West. We've got to be honest about this.
Philip Balboni, what do you make of that? Because I thought it was quite a perceptive observation about how the West doesn't understand what's going on in Ukraine.
I agree with him, Hugh. I mean, I think we in America, we've not had conflicts in our country since the mid 1800s, right? The Civil War was really the last time here in our country. We can't appreciate what the Ukrainians are going through every single day. Soldiers dying, civilians under threat of drone attacks or missile attacks. I think he's wrong that, that won't cause us to end our support. I think we have to worry about whether we will continue to do this indefinitely. I mean, I support the U.S. involvement in the war, but I think we have to think about how the war ends. And they don't want to talk about it. The Ukrainians don't want to talk about it. And as a result, the EU and the United States also don't really want to talk about it. But the war is
Well, the
stalemated.
Daily Chatter has had stories. You've had stories on the Ukrainian offensive, which has begun to actually make some progress. And all they have to do is get within 10 miles of the Sea of Azov, and the Russians to the south are cut off. Do you think they're going to make it, Philip?
But they've made a little progress, Hugh. I mean, in the south, we're getting down towards the Sea of Azov, but not a lot. And I honestly don't think they will be able to succeed with a counteroffensive. I mean, winter is drawing closer in Central Europe, and the war is kind of stalemated. The Russians have incredible defensive lines set up, multiple lines. They've penetrated one little area of one line. There's a lot more to go. I wish I could be optimistic. They're brave, incredibly courageous people. But I think at some point we have to talk about how the war ends because, there maybe 200,000 or more people have already died. That's incredible to think
Well,
about.
I've tried to study stalemates like this in the past, and Yom Kippur War, North Korean War, to a lesser extent Vietnam War, you only get to the peace table when the side that wants to settle is winning. So Ukraine gets some momentum. They might get to negotiations. If it's a stalemate, there's no incentive for Putin to do anything. I think that's what. Do you agree with that assessment, Philip?
I don't think Putin has any reason to settle right now. I agree with that. I mean, I think he's looking ahead to our election in 24 and thinking maybe he's going to get lucky and have a different occupant of the White House who won't be so supportive of the war. He can afford to wait. The economy in Russia is not doing well, but it's hanging on. And he's recruiting now new soldiers for the war in Central Asia. You've probably read about it in Kazakhstan and other countries in Central Asia. There's a lot of native Russian speakers there, and they're recruiting them for the war effort. So I think he can hang on.
He also is getting aid from China. And you've been covering Gina Raimondo, our Commerce Secretary, is in China right now. And I'm not a big proponent of this trip. I do not know why we've sent 3 cabinet members in a row to China. It looks like appeasement to me, Philip. How do you read it?
I wish I could agree with you, but I don't. I think we have to manage the looming conflict with China. I mean, when you think about the potential for really harming Americans' national interest, and harming Americans, young Americans who would have to fight. I think I said this last month that the potential of war between the U.S. and China is very real. There are things happening in China right now. The dismantling of their economy is very severe. 20% of young Chinese have no jobs, and I think it's a dangerous situation. I don't think we should ever appease China. I think we should compete with them intelligently, and I think it requires diplomacy and people like Secretary Raimondo, who's a very competent cabinet secretary, going and talking about some of these trade issues where we could continue our very important economic relationship with China without further undermining um, the national security framework. It's a very
But Philip,
volatile
we
situation.
sent. I understand sending Blinken first. If you want to try and diffuse conflict, and then we double down with Yellen, and then we triple down with Raimondo, and the Chinese have not sent anybody here. It's like they're treating us as a satrap.
That is true. They need to do some reciprocity, and you may have just seen it was reported overnight that President Xi is now not going to attend the G20 summit, which is coming up week after next in New Delhi. He was widely expected to be there. Biden is probably going to be there. They might have had a chance to talk. He's now not going. Nobody knows why he's not going. Only he knows and people around him. That's not a very good sign. We need to watch for um, problems within the regime there because
I
President
agree. It's such a CCP. They're so communist now. Philip, I want to stop and talk about Niger. You're one of the few people who would actually be able to explain West African politics to us. They had a coup. There's a junta. It happens so often in countries we don't know very much about. Why is that significant to us? It's in the Daily Chatter a lot. I've been following it because of the Daily Chatter. But why do we care?
we care because the countries of Central Africa, Niger, Chad, Burkina Faso, have been experiencing military coups. These countries all have significant Islamic jihadism present. And these, some of them are ISIS, some of them are Al Qaeda, some of them are variations of those. This is highly destabilizing, not only for those countries, but other countries around them over into West Africa, now down even to parts of Southern Africa. Africa is an important place, and Islamic jihadism is not over. I mean, we think because we've left Afghanistan and we killed the last leader of Al Qaeda that somehow this grave threat that we've been fighting since 2001 is over. It's not. It's alive and well in Africa and countries like Niger, which most people have never been to and couldn't pinpoint on a map, are important
No,
places.
I want to remind people that the last cycle of Islamist terrorism began in Africa when we noticed it. It actually began earlier in Saudi Arabia, but we noticed it when the embassies were blown up in Tanzania and Kenya in 1998. There followed
Exactly.
9/11 3 years later.
That's You're right. That's exactly where it really germinated. And our embassy was blown up in Mombasa, and um, we can't take our eye off this ball. We cannot.
Well, does Macron agree with you? Because most of these West African countries are former French colonies, and usually it has been the French who have intervened to restore stability with some American support. Is that what's going to happen here?
The French are pulling out, and in fact, these countries are either expelling the French military or telling them to get out. The the ambassador to Niger, the French ambassador, is being threatened with arrest just as of yesterday. So I respect President Macron a great deal, but unfortunately, he is pulling back from those old colonial era involvements. And I'm afraid, once again, the United States is going to be left behind to pick up whatever pieces there are. And Hugh, the Russians are there. The Wagner Group, with or without Evgeny Prigozhin, the Wagner Group is all over these Central African countries. They are there. They're advising these military dictators. They have fighters on the ground. This is not good for U.S. national interests.
Now, Philip, I want to, because school began this week for most American children, or it will begin next week, I want to remind people the Daily Chatter is free to teachers and students. And that's really a
Yes,
public
it is.
service that's extraordinary. How do teachers and students sign up? Because once a day you should learn about the world. It takes 10 minutes to read, maybe 15, and you'll be smarter about the world than anyone else. How do a teacher or a student get that, Philip?
They just go to our website, www.dailychatter.com. They look for a little thing that says university up in the navigation. They click on that, and they will be able to navigate themselves to where they can sign up for free. The subscription is free really for as long as they're a student. It's one of the proudest things I do is help young people know the world better. I mean, we are a real business. We're not a nonprofit. We love to have people become regular paid subscribers, go to the same address. But I encourage every student, every teacher to take advantage of this opportunity. And I want to thank you
really
because
is.
many students have
It
done
beats
it
current
after
events in
commencement.
America. It tells them about the world and the maps and the pictures. It's very well done. And especially when it
Okay.
comes to, they're not going to be able to learn Gabon unless they know where it is, right? It's just not going to make any sense to them.
That's exactly right. This morning's lead story was about Sudan, which is a very important country in north central Africa. And, when you can see it in the map that accompanies the story, you see that Egypt and Libya are to the north, and you have the Red Sea and Ethiopia over here. It's the gateway to Central Africa, to the countries we've been talking about with jihadism. And there's a civil war going on there right now.
That's why you should read dailychatter.com. Philip Balboni, talk to you next month. Thank you for Around the Worldism with me once a month. I appreciate it. Dailychatter.com.